but for many other audiences, this is a new one, to kind of think for just a moment and picture your own death. You know, you'd have hospice, hopefully. Would you have loved ones around? Would you have your pet there? Would you have your family with you? Would you have sort of just your wife, one person, or would you have a lot of people? What would that look like? Just for a moment, think about that. Now, how many of you pictured this? This is how we die in America. This is how most people die. And one of the things I try to tell families in a gentle, loving way is this is a decision. This is a decision, sometimes active, sometimes passive, but it's a decision. This right here is the other option. This is my children's principal and her mother. Now, these are both people, a couple of weeks before death, different scenarios. I think one of the things that we have to be careful of in hospice is to not go right, wrong. Right, wrong. We can't do that because for many people that first death is very meaningful. The fight is the meaning. And we have to honor and work around that and help people who do find meaning in that first death. But it's a confusing message for the public. This was a Newsweek cover. This man was dead, but now he's not. I mean, people remember just sort of seeing the cover and they think, well, obviously, if modern medicine can bring him back, surely they can do it for grandma. Surely they can do it for grandfather. And things go wrong. People don't understand that this is a very specific article about someone who obviously had a witnessed event and is very young and healthy and not, up in years with multi-organ system failure and many other things that can happen at the end of life. So it's confusing, and our wishes can be confusing, like this cartoon. Just so you know, I never want to live in a vegetative state dependent on some machine. If that ever happens, just unplug me, okay? Obviously, his wife thought, with that big screen TV, that he was living in a vegetative state, dependent on a machine. And as my kids would say, oh, Dad, it's an old-fashioned TV. It's not flat. Which is shocking to me that that's their view. I had the privilege, as did Kubler-Ross, with spending time with Mother Teresa. And it was an interesting experience being in her home for the dying in Calcutta. And I walked in to volunteer, and I said, I'm here to volunteer. And I said, what are people dying of? Because I thought, I don't know, I was at an IDT meeting or something. I wanted some background. And I said to the sister, what are people dying of? And she said to me, we don't know, we don't care, we don't have time to ask, are you here to help or not? Okay. So I had to regroup there and get ready to help. And I remember looking for something medical to do for the dying. And there wasn't anything. I could only feed them if they could still eat, or give them something to drink if they could still drink. And it was 140 degrees practically, and I would take them. There were no Hoyer lifts. I would just pick them up and take them to have a shower. And when they got a shower, I got a shower. And it was, that's the way it worked. And by the time you came back, you were both dry because it was a self-drying system in that heat. And it was profound for two reasons. Mother Teresa talked about everyone who enters there has to feel some love and kindness before they die. And I also didn't have not only no medicine or anything between us, I didn't even have a language with these people. So it was really one human being with another human being. I also have to tell you, while I was there, Mother Teresa was sick at the time. It was her last year of life. So I could only see her in Mass. You weren't really able to get very close to her. And so one day I was lost and I went to the Mother House and I was getting some directions, and one of the sisters, I was working on The Needs of the Dying, the first book, and one of the sisters said to me, oh, Mother heard you're working on this book. She wants to meet with you. I was like a little shocked and got out my day planner to see when, and they said, just come on. So I went over and I walked in and there she was. Or more like there she was, because she was this tall. And I remember sitting down with her and I said, we have so many resources for the dying in our country, and you have so few. How do you do it? And she looked at me like, silly boy. She said, the dying need tender, loving care, nothing more. The dying need tender, loving care. And I think of how much technology we throw at the dying and forget many times the tender, loving care. And hospice embodies bringing that tender, loving care to our lives at that important time. Well, while I was sitting there with her, she was talking to me, and I was obviously listening very intently, and she turned the conversation and she said, I'm going to be dying soon. And of course, at that point, I'm just trying to conjugate and figure out my next words, because it's 120 degrees. Mother Teresa has just told me she's going to be dying soon. I have no idea what to say. And as I'm sitting there, she looks at me, seeing I'm having trouble what to say next, and she says to me, do you have a business card? And I said, my first thought was, my hospice gets so mad at me whenever I tell them, oh, we've got to take this person on to hospice. Even though they're out of territory, it would be very important for us. I thought, oh, the team's going to be mad at me, but they'll understand, I hope. She's asking for my card. What am I going to say? So obviously she wasn't really, but I said, yes, I have a business card. She goes, I have a business card too. Would you like one? I went, you have a business card? And she goes, oh, yes, you Americans, you love business cards. I said, oh, sure, I'd be happy to, and then all of a sudden she waved to the sister who came in and gave her a business card, and at a certain point she said, switch. And we switched cards. And I thought, Mother Teresa's got a card. What's it going to say? Mother, sister, saint? I don't know. But it had a beautiful little prayer on it that had been donated to her. And I thought about that idea that many times people think if you work in hospice, you're just going to become sad and morbid and dress in black and get, people have said to me, do they give you like huge antidepressants every time you start your day? And, that we just become different people. And I thought about Mother Teresa, and I thought, if any of that was true, she would have to be the saddest person of all, given how much death and dying she's seen in her life. And I sat there looking at this woman giggling about business cards, and I could feel the happiness coming off of her. And for those of us in the room, we know that working in end of life actually doesn't make us sad and depressed. It's very life-affirming and very enriching in so many ways. So I invite you, the next time you're giving out your card, to think about the happiness that could be just even found in that little simple gesture. I'll never remember coming back, oh, you met Mother Teresa, what'd you do? Oh, a little networking, we exchanged cards. But spirituality comes up at the end of life, and one of my sayings that I love is we're responsible for our health, but not to blame for our illnesses. We're responsible for our health, but not to blame for our illnesses. And so many people look back when they're at the end of life and think, why am I here? What did I do wrong? And one of the things hospice is so good at is letting people know that, dying unfortunately is inevitable, and you didn't do anything to get here. It is part of life. Your work is challenging. It's important. It's life-changing. I often think about when people are asked, what do you do when you're at end-of-life care? I think really what you do is you take someone's possibly worst moments that you can't fix, you can't make it all better, but what you can do is bring a little meaning to it. You can help them get through it. And in some ways, that's really a remarkable, remarkable work to have. One of the things I wanted to share with you is a story from my other world, the police world. And it's a story of an officer, but let me start before that. There was a woman who was a work-at-home mother, and she lived south of San Francisco, a couple hours south. And she did consulting, and she had a 6-year-old daughter, and every once in a while she would have to go into the city to do some work with one of the companies she worked with. And she would always leave her daughter with a neighbor. One day, just as she'd done many times, she got up, she had breakfast with her daughter, sent her daughter off to preschool at the time, and said goodbye and I love you, and went off to work. The daughter came home, the neighbor picked her up, as she always did, and daughter was playing in the front yard. It was a corner lot. A car came around the corner and hit the little girl. The police officer I mentioned was first on the scene. He went up to the little girl. He saw her airway was collapsed. He picked her up in his arms. The paramedics came. They started artificial life support. They did everything they could. They brought her to the hospital. They were working very hard on her. They were trying to frantically get the mother and get in touch with her. They couldn't get her. After about an hour, they realized they couldn't save the girl's life. Then they got in touch with the mother. They told her that her child had died. I don't know that I would have gone there, but they said your child had died and was in an accident. And, can we send someone to get you? And she said, no, I just want to get there. So she drove the 2 hours to the hospital, walked in completely stoic. But once she was away from the task of driving, she completely fell apart. The doctors sat with her. They explained every one of her daughter's injuries and what had happened and how they had done everything they could. The nurses, chaplains explained that they really had tried so hard to save her daughter's life. She was obviously inconsolable, as we all would be. They had family members gathering. They wanted to give her some room with her family, so they were walking to her room they had, and she walked through the emergency room, and it was now 4 hours later, and there was the police officer who was first on the scene. And he walked up to that mother and he said, I just want you to know your daughter was not alone. And that's what made just a small difference to that mother, knowing in her daughter's most frightening moments, someone was there, even if that someone was a stranger. And to me, that's what makes your work, this event, what you do, the work everyone does, so important. Now, some of you may be deflecting that, oh, he doesn't understand, I'm not one of the medical directors, or I don't really see patients, or I'm this, or I'm that. It doesn't really matter. You are here listening, learning, growing, teaching about the most difficult subject in the world, the end of life. And I have no doubt that each one of you will be used in some way that are going to make such a difference, even more than you already make, when you go back home. That's why, to me, when I was asked to be here and I think about what you're doing and the scope of how many people there are behind each one of you that you take care of, that you may not even see, that's what makes it really an amazing thing just to share this evening with you. I want to just close tonight, because I'll be talking to many of you tomorrow also, about things Mother taught me. Life is an achievement, and death is part of that achievement. The dying need tender, loving care. Don't do the technology and forget the tender, loving care. And we bring that to so many people. That's what you do. And a picture of me with obviously the mother that I was talking about, Mother Teresa. I want to leave you with this thought: if medicine's purpose is solely defined in terms of curing, then what direction are we left when a patient is dying? That's what we are trying to teach the whole rest of the medical system, that there's other options out there. There's other ways to go. There's new horizons. There's new ways to find meaning in life and death. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.